Welcome to Pop-Out Printing, a printing workshop inspired by Zandra Rhodes. I'm Mhairi Allan, founder and designer of Paper Houses Design, a textile studio based in Aberdeenshire. I'm really excited for doing this workshop with you in Aberdeen Art Gallery and Museums today because Zandra Rhodes was one of the first textile designers that I was really inspired by and got me into textile design. So join me today to do this workshop with things that you could easily source in order to create your own Zandra Rhodes inspired pattern that will pop.
Let's look at what you need for the workshop. So first of all, you need an embroidery hoop, mesh fabric or tights, some fabric to print on, paper, Mod Podge or PV glue for the stencil, printing ink or acrylic paint, cardboard or an old plastic card for squeegee, brush, scissors, pen, tape. Now for your inspiration. So looking through Zandra Rhodes' work, start pulling out elements that you find interesting, and for me it was these kind of wiggly wavy lines. I tried a few things, but these were really kept coming back to me. And think about, how you could draw things in this sort of way, and I thought it reminded me of seaweed, so I started thinking, okay, how would seaweed be drawn this sort of way? And I gathered my inspiration and then took it forward to drawing the design. So when drawing the design, you want to have all your inspiration around you, and you want to make sure your design is no bigger than your embroidery hoop, so a good idea is to draw around that first. And then just mark some bits in from the edge, because you don't want to have your drawing going right up to the edge, because you need to have room for your ink when you're printing. So you can just mark these out if you want, because you do want to be kind of freehand with your drawing here. There's a lot of kind of obvious handmade marks in Zandra's work. So I'm just going kind of freehand. You see I've written a little bit too close so the lines touch each other, but it's not really marked out at this point because I'm going to alter and change before I go forward to the final. And just keep playing about. So how do you set up the hoop? So you need your hoop, and it kind of comes in two pieces. One bit's got a little screw in it and one bit's just plain. So if it's a plain bit, you want to be putting your kind of mesh fabric over it. This fabric is actually just from a charity shop from an old curtain. It's a woven fabric and it's got kind of little gaps between it, very subtle, small little gaps. So anything that's like this you can use. And I'm just tightening up there, pulling it tight and taut around the edges, so not too much, you don't want to distort the fabric, but just so that it's not moving. And I'm just kind of tightening the bolt as I go. Then cut off all the excess because you really don't want that dipping in the ink. For the fabric, I would suggest using something that's second hand, or like, a ruined dress or something like that. But if you're looking to buy something online to suit, then a kind of organza or a voile is the sort of thing you want to be looking at. So there's a good tension there, it kind of feels like a tambourine sort of style. Another thing you could use as well is just tights, just use old tights. So it's a knitted fabric, so it's got a little bit more stretch in it, but they both work fine, and it's really a case of just trying out stuff. So now I'm making the stencil with your drawing. I'm going to show you two ways of doing this. The first way is with Mod Podge or something like PV glue or similar, directly onto the screen in order to create the stencil. So pick which one you want to do, and then just using some sort of permanent marker, using a Sharpie, just draw around the design. Now here's where I could fix that line being too close together, two lines being too close together, because I just draw what I actually want now. So the flat side against the paper, and you can see here I'm just kind of altering and changing to suit, and there you go, done. And it doesn't matter, there's like a couple of little wonky bits there, we're going to sort that out. So now turn it around so that the flat surface is facing up and not touching the table. Now we're going to fill in the negative space, so that's the space that isn't your shape, with Mod Podge. You can use PVA glue, it just doesn't wash as well. And that's the whole idea for this, is you want to be able to print with this screen, then give it a wee rinse out and reuse it. So when the stencil's on it, using something like Mod Podge, which is a decoupage glue, sort of varnishy thing, is great. So it's filling in all these little holes in the mesh, meaning that when we do try and put the paint or the ink through, it can't go through those holes. It could only go through the positive space, which is the shape, because that's the space that's left unglued. You could use a sponge brush, or you could use just a normal brush. Just make sure you clean them really well after so you could use them again. So just take your time here, because this is the actual shape that you'll be printing. So if there's any bits that aren't quite right previously, this is when you could sort it. And it does start to dry and go slightly clear, So yeah, just kind of watch your timing. So just make sure you're filling in any holes. Sometimes there's little air bubbles and it makes little holes and stuff, and you don't need to go right up to the edge. You want to leave a little bit of a gap if possible, because you don't want it sticking to the wood. So kind of gap there is great. The second way to do this is a paper stencil. So just get some paper. I'm using just kids craft paper here, but newsprint or thin paper is great. And I'm just drawing the design on it that I want. Then I'm cutting it out with just a craft knife. You can use scissors, craft knife is just a bit neater. And this is the final shape that I'll print. So I'm cutting out the positive shape, and I'll use the negative shape to print with, which you'll see later. So on to prepping the table. You want to put down on your surface either some old blanket like this, or else some cardboard, something that's just got a little bit of bounce in it. Then you want to put down the fabric that you're going to be printing on, and you want to give this a wee iron out. You don't want to have any lumps and bumps in it. Same if you're using a blanket on the table first, give that a wee iron out. Then just kind of push it out from the centre slightly and tape it up. By taping it down, it just means that it won't lift every single time that you print, which is great. It keeps it nice and neat. And now you're ready to start printing. So I'll show you how to use the stencil printing first. So I'm just doing a bit of scrap here. I put down the fabric, put down the stencil, and then put my screen on top. So the screen is just blank. Then I'm just going to put some acrylic paint down or ink paste. And then using a bit of cardboard, I'm just going to kind of put a slight angle and pull the ink or the paint over the screen, making sure that the shape is fully covered. So what this does is the paper blocks off the rest of the paint from going through, and it just goes through the shape. And then you're left, if you peel it off gently, with the shape there. This one's quite cool. It's picked up some kind of lines from the cardboard. This is using now the stencil painted onto the screen. And I'm just using another bit of cardboard here, or a voucher card, stuff like that's really good. And I'm testing it on a scrap bit of fabric first. You want to test it on scrap fabric to make sure there's not any little kind of dots or holes there. So there's one little dot, but I'm not too bothered about that. I think that's worked really well. So now on to printing on the actual fabric. So always test out your screens first. If there was any little kind of mark there, then I would just let it dry and then fill in that hole with some Mod Podge. So I'm putting on some printing ink this time. So this is pigment screen printing ink, which you can get from lots of different craft stores. And it's water-based and eco-friendly. And now just with my squeegee, I'm putting at a slight angle there and just pulling along. You don't always get the full 45-degree angle, which is what we'd normally say for printing with these, but just if you have it at a slight angle, just pull it towards you. Now, I've done probably a couple, maybe like one too many pulls there, so pulls when you push down the cardboard and pull the ink across. It does look a little bit thick there, so for this second one, I'm just going to do it a little bit less, because what you don't want is you don't want the ink kind of like coming out too much of that space, of that positive space, because it could leave smudges and marks. It will do that eventually after a few prints, but we'll try and avoid that by doing just as many pulls as we need, but not too many. So here I'm just kind of doing a little half drop repeat. And you can see there it's starting to go a little bit smudgy, so this is the point where I'd go and clean my screen up with it ready to go again. Now you could just do one colour repeat, they're really, really striking, but if you wanted to use a different colour and a different shape, just get another screen. I've put masking tape around these screens because, we didn't go right up to the edge. And I've just let the pink dry, and I'm going to pop some blue over it. So I'm just doing the exact same there with, this is a screen print ink, but as I say, you could use acrylic paint, and just kind of turning the squeegee or the bit of cardboard as I'm holding it up so that it doesn't drip onto the fabric. Then lifting it from one end, and there we go. So think about Xandra's work when you're doing this. The colours, the layers, the maximalism, and really just go for it. When using different colours, you want to use the lightest colour first and then, graduate up to the darker colour last. It just works better for when you're overlaying colours, and you do get some really interesting effects with overlays. Also, just by drawing on with the paint or the printing ink, you can get some lovely hand-drawn elements in there, just like what you get with Sandra's work. So here I'm doing little dots by just twisting the brush around. This is a really short brush and I've already pressed on a bit of scrap, and I'm just overlaying it on top of the motif, so that's the shape in some areas, and thinking just about the kind of spaces between and just relying on my eye to tell me what looks nice. And once you're finished, you could dry it with the hairdryer or leave it overnight to dry. Once it's dry, you're ready to set the ink or paint. So you want to put something down to protect your surface, then something on top like a blanket, old tea towel or paper to protect the print from your iron. Then put the iron to the fabric type, and if there's any steam setting, switch that off because this needs to be a dry heat. You want to go over your fabric for 5 to 10 minutes, moving slowly as you go around, and then that should be it. You want to wash this out then with cold water until the water runs clear, and then warm water. Don't put it in the machine because it will ruin your design. And then that's you've created your pattern. So you can make it as elaborate or as simple as you want. You might even want to add some embroidery.
Thanks for taking part in the workshop. Feel free to share what you've created. I'd love to see it. Bye!